Hello and welcome to the Farming Week, the podcast from Agriland that keeps you up to date with all the latest in Irish agriculture. I'm Charles O'Donnell and I'm joined by journalists Aisling O'Brien and Louise Hickey. The past week has seen the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine announce that it is now accepting applications for the 2024 Basic Income Support for Sustainability, as well as other supports under Pillar 1 of CAP, including eco-schemes. Farmers have until May 15th to get their applications in. Also this week, the Irish Cattle Breeding Federation has said that it is making a number of what it has called improvements to the National Genotyping Programme, amid concerns over the time it takes for calf passports to issue. What changes have the ICBF made, Aisling?
Yeah, Charles. So maybe first we might remind listeners about the National Genotyping Programme, because it's all aiming to help Ireland to take the first step in achieving a fully genotyped national herd. Now, it's a voluntary programme available to both beef and dairy farmers, and it's going to run over a 5-year period. It's all being administered by the ICBF, and it's on what is called a cost-sharing model between the Department of Agriculture, the beef and dairy industries, and participating farmers. So the first year of the 5-year programme, which is a budget of €23 million, is being funded entirely through the Brexit Adjustment Reserve Fund. That's the BAR fund. And for the remaining 4 years then, the genotyping costs, which will be €18 a sample, will be divided equally among the programme partners, which of course is the department, industry, and the participating farmers. So why are we doing it? Essentially, we're told that genotyping the national herd will give an opportunity for both the dairy and beef industries to increase their sustainability credentials on a global level. And if this program is seen through to its completion, Ireland will become the first country in the world to provide a DNA verified traceability system. So very important program, very worthwhile program indeed, because we see consumers around the world are demanding, verified sustainability credentials and claims being backed up by science. And this is a step towards that. So as we reported on Tuesday on Agriland, ICBF issued a statement saying that over 127,000 passports have been issued to date under the programme, which is now in its 8th week. And it said that the current average length of time that a sample is spending in the laboratory is 4.5 days. Now, 98% of the calf samples are spending less than a week in the lab, but the ICBF did admit that the 2% that are taking longer than that, it's understandably causing a lot of frustration for farmers. Now, over 87,000 calf samples under the programme were received into the laboratory last week, and 20,000 samples alone were received in the post on Tuesday. So it just gives an idea of the scale of the testing that's going on. And the average turnaround time from birth to passport being issued, the ICBF said, is 13.1 days. Now, to date, over 230,000 samples have been received in the laboratory, with over 150,000 samples genotyped. And the latest data shows that in or around 1.5% at the moment of the samples being received are deemed as unsuitable or empty. But as you said, Charles, with any new schemes, there can be teething issues. And we here in Agriland have been contacted by farmers around the country who are concerned about the length of time that it is taking for calf passports to make its way back to farm after they have submitted their sample. And obviously, any lengthy delays could impact a farmer's ability to move calves off farm, for example, to a sale at a mart. And indeed, if a calf goes over 42 days of age, then it must be TB tested. So that would be an additional cost for the farmer as well. So as you said, ICBF have announced that they're making a number of what they're calling improvements to the programme in light of the concerns that have been raised. So they're going to automatically issue a calf's passport when the sample hits 10 days in the lab. Once that happens, the farmer should receive the passport in the post in the coming days, and the genotype result will follow thereafter. Now, ICBF said this should relieve any concerns about moving animals in a timely manner. And they said in the event that a sample is identified as being unsuitable or empty, that a passport will be issued in those cases automatically. And the farmer then will be required to follow up with their tag company in order to order a new DNA button tag to resample the calf for its genomic evaluation. So some farmers have said that they have received passports then on different days, despite sending all of their samples together in the post. And ICBF said that this is a normal occurrence, in their words, not mine. mine, and they're endeavouring to reduce the incidence of this happening for farmers, because that can be quite frustrating as well when you're expecting a batch back that you send out.
Yeah, Ashling, of course, there's no doubt that many farmers will be frustrated by this, but this has reached a political level as well. A member of the Senate has raised it.
Yes, that's right. Fine Gael Senator Tim Lombard spoke with Agriland this week. He's also been contacted by farmers. Around a dozen farmers in Cork, where he's based, have contacted them. They're concerned about the length of time it's taking passports to come back to them. And he said traditionally, when farmers send an application form over the years, they'd get it back maybe in 3 or 4 days, the passport in the post. And he said at the moment, you're looking at a scenario where it could be anything up to 2 or maybe even 3 weeks in some locations. And he spoke with one farmer who had a male calf, and he was waiting 21 days for the passport to come back. And then when it did actually come back, it was inconclusive. So the farmer has to go through the entire process again. So I suppose Tim Lombard said that it's important that the system is robust and that farmers have confidence in it. You know, it's voluntary, obviously, and we need as many farmers involved in this as possible to make sure that we get the correct samples back. But, you know, especially when we're coming into the peak of spring calving, Tim Lombard said, you know, we need this to be right. Have a listen.
But the peak is the worry. Like, this is what, heading into the end of February at this stage, we're going to see the peak in calves probably in the next 10 days. A lot of valuable samples going to be tested. We need to make sure that the capacity is in the labs to make sure the farmers get their actual passports back in time.
So, Charles, Senator Tim Lombard as well is vice chair of the Joint Reactors Committee on Agriculture. And he said that he's actually written to the committee asking them to contact ICBF to get an update on the issue. And he's hoping that the committee will agree to the proposal. And he reckons that would be beneficial to farmers because they need information here. And look, hopefully that the update from ICBF and the changes will go some way to allay the fears of farmers, and that any backlogs or delays will be dealt with, as expeditiously as possible.
Moving on to a separate story now, Ashling, and the department has published data on the bovine TB eradication programme for the full year 2023, but it doesn't make for pretty reading, does it?
No, it doesn't at all. So what we learned from this report is in the 12 months of last year, there were 28,868 TB test reactions detected in cattle compared to just over 23,000 in the same 12-month period of 2022. And on the same time period comparison, 2023 saw just over 5,000 herds locked up with TB compared to 4,492 in 2022. Now, the herd incidence rate as of December 31st last stood at 4.89%. And that, Charles, is the highest herd incidence rate at the close of year since before 2010. The CSO data doesn't go back any further than that. So that is a pretty stark figure. We're going back, a long way. And 4.89 is now the incidence rate. It is an increase on the 22 figure, and it follows on from 2 consecutive years of very slight improvements on incidence rates in 2021 and 2020 as well, but not going in the right direction, and will be a big cause of concern to farmers out there.
And Ashling, how much did all this cost the state last year?
Yeah, well, that's always a bone of contention, isn't it, with farm organisations, how much this TB eradication programme is costing the state and indeed farmers as well. So the data shows us that the state spent around €74.3 million last year on the TB eradication programme. That's up 29% from the figure in 2022, which was just over €57 million. And the figure, the spend in recent years has been around the mid €50 million range in or about. So it is a considerable jump last year. So what was it all spent on? Well, the on-farm market valuation scheme, essentially the main compensation lever for farmers who go down with TB, saw the state pay out €34.7 million. That's an increase of over 50% on the 2022 figure. Other compensation measures cost around €5 million, and they're up around 40% on the previous year. Now, the wildlife control aspect of the eradication program, which often comes in for criticism from farm organizations in terms of the need the call for them to spend more money and allocate more resources to that program. That incurred a cost of €7.7 million last year. That's up 20% on 2022, when it was around €6.4 million. And I'm sure maybe farm organizations will be saying it's not enough, even though it's standing at €7.7 million. The only areas, interestingly, Charles, before we leave it, which saw less expenditure last year compared to 2022, was in fees for vets, which amounted to just over €13 million, but it is only a decrease of 2%. And research spend actually went down as well. It stood at €832,000 in 2023. And it is down on the previous year's figure as well. So look, I mean, I think it is a cause of concern that the incidence rate is gone back to a level that we haven't seen since 2010. And that is a huge cause of concern. And no doubt the TB forum, when it meets again, this will be hotly debated, these figures.
Yeah, there's no doubt, Aisling, that those figures are not moving in the right direction at the moment. But TB isn't the only area where the department has come out with statistics for 2023. They've also done the same for illegal burning. Can you tell me more about that, Aisling?
Yeah, so the Department of Agriculture have confirmed to Agriland that they identified 665 herds which were associated with illegal burning last year. And the department said that those herds either had lands burnt in the closed period or at the correct time of year, but without the relevant consent. So they hadn't gone through the correct procedures. In 2022, 500 herds were identified as having ineligible land as a result of burning. So we're going in the wrong direction here as well, or the right direction if somebody said that they're being detected illegally burning as well. So I suppose in terms of the law on this, under Section 40 of the Wildlife Act, as many farmers are aware, there is a closed period. So growing vegetation cannot be burnt between March 1st and August 31st of any given year on any land not yet cultivated. Land which is found then to be illegally burned can be deemed ineligible for payment under the Basic Income Support for Sustainability, BIS, as you mentioned earlier, which is now open for applications, and other area-based schemes, including the ANC, the Areas of Natural Constraint Scheme, which is a very important scheme, particularly maybe in western areas of the country as well. So it can be a big risk for farmers, in terms of their income, Charles, when it comes to impacting their payments. And where land has been burned between the dates of March 1st and August 31st, the department said it's not in a state suitable for grazing or cultivation, and therefore it's not eligible for the remainder of the year. And that means that the land cannot be paid on in the year that it's burned, but it is eligible in the following year. And that only applies where an appeal is unsuccessful. And lands will remain eligible where controlled burning has been carried out at the right time of the year in full compliance with all of the requirements. That involves consulting the guards first and the local fire service. And if you have designated lands, then you have to get approval first from the National Parks and Wildlife Service before you burn as well. So the department said it's actively investigating incidents of illegal burning using a range of satellite imagery, including the Copernicus Sentinel satellite data, which is also used for the area monitoring system, which we've spoken about previously here on the podcast, the AMS system. And the department said it also carries out follow-up visits where it deems it necessary to confirm the presence of burnt land. So they look at the satellite images first, and then they might go out on the ground after that. But 665 herds associated with illegal burning last year.
And do we know, Aisling, if there was any particular areas of the country where it was more prevalent than others?
Well, Mayo was the county with the highest number of herds associated with illegal burning, Charles, at 235. That was followed by Kerry on 178, Galway on 48, Waterford on 40, and Cork with 30. There was one detection each made in Clare, Louth, Roscommon and Offaly. And we've a full county by county breakdown if you want to check how many herds were associated with legal burning in your county. But Mayo there by far and away the greatest number with 235.
I just noticed there, Aisling, that your own county, Kerry, and my county, Clare, were on the opposite ends of that. So I don't know what that says, but
Play nice, Charles, play nice. And just before we leave it, Charles, the department said it has received 157 appeals in relation to 2023 burning. They're currently reviewing all of those. 38 successful appeal letters have issued to date, and we'll be keeping an eye on it on Agriland to see how those appeals pan out.
Aisling, as we know, water quality is an ongoing issue, especially in relation to nitrates and the dairy sector, which comes in for the most attention, I suppose, when it comes to nitrates. And in fact, there was a meeting of the Joint Reactors Committee on Agriculture this week in which Antashka claimed that the state is setting farmers and water quality up to fail. But you were speaking this week to IFA Dairy Chairperson Stephen Arthur, and it's fair to say, I suppose, that he's concerned over what he would say is a disproportionate focus on the dairy sector when it comes to nitrates and related issues.
Yeah, actually, Stephen Arthur told me he feels that the government has a lack of support at the moment for the dairy sector, which maybe other sectors might laugh at. But he feels that farmers out there with herds of between 40 and 60 cows, small to medium farmers, are under pressure to comply with these regulations, around nitrates and water quality. And he said that in his view, the Department of Agriculture seems to be very willing to carry out the instructions of European policy, and they don't understand the consequences that these policies are having inside the farm gate. And he gave an example of a farmer maybe with 60 cows who's done everything right and then may have to get up to 10 or 14 acres just to keep his cows, to keep where he's at. And then to add insult to injury, he might have to pay anywhere between €300 and €400 an acre to rent that ground. And I think maybe it comes back to, Charles, that when we think of nitrates derogation, maybe wrongly, a lot of the time people think of, very, very big herds. But we know that people who are availing of derogation kind of herds of many different sizes as well. And, he just said that dairy farming is the main fabric of rural Ireland, but it is under a lot of pressure, when it comes to these policies. And, he said that Teagasc have said that reducing the stocking rate from 250 kilograms of organic nitrogen per hectare down to 220 under the derogation cut has shown that it would have very little, if any, impact on water quality, he said. Yet it's going to have a massive impact on farm incomes, especially on smaller farmers. And I also spoke to Stephen Arthur about another issue that's upsetting farmers at the moment, which is the proposal to increase passenger numbers at Dublin Airport by 25%. That's currently being considered by council planners. And no doubt, if such a plan got the green light, will have an impact on our emissions as well. Have a listen to what Stephen Arthur had to say on that.
Farmers are quite aggrieved over this. Like, they feel that the dairy cow is paying for everything. They're paying for the expansion of the airport cap in the Dublin airport. They're also paying for the rectifying of the water quality. They're paying for the greenhouse gas, getting to the levels of greenhouse gas. Like just look where dairying is at the moment. The government lack of support for the dairy industry, which is, it's over 90% full-time family farms on an average of 53 hectares.
So as you can hear there, Charles, Stephen Arthur not very happy, saying that the dairy cow has to pay for everything at the moment, and they can't do so, essentially.
Yeah, and just while we're on the topic, Aisling, of the sentiments of dairy farmers, a study was carried out of Kerry Co-op milk suppliers at the end of last year, the results of which were announced just in the last week. And that found that 87% of over 1,500 respondents to the survey said that they thought controlling future milk processing and value-added operations is either somewhat or very important. And it was interesting as well that younger farmers seemed to feel more strongly about that. So that was very interesting results from that Kerry Co-op survey.
Absolutely, yeah. And I suppose given the fact that, there was discussions at one point, they've been long suspended at this stage between Kerry Group and Kerry Co-op about a possible joint venture on the dairy business down here. The findings of that survey are interesting, and the board have said that the chair there of the board, James Tagney, who came into power in December, said that they will be bringing back proposals, based on the findings of these surveys or of this survey, and as well, obviously, they brought in Jim Wolfe to look at the future strategy of the co-op as well. So it'll be interesting to see what proposals come forward, and would those joint venture talks be reignited? Who knows at this point?
Yeah, it's definitely something to keep an eye out for, Aisling. Moving on now to something a little different, namely septic tanks. The government grant for the repair, upgrade or replacement of septic tanks drew the ire of independent TD Matty McGrath this week, who described the rollout of the grant as ridiculous. Louise, what are the issues Deputy McGrath has highlighted here?
Yes, Charles. So changes to the grant for septic tanks came into place from this year, increasing the maximum grant amount available to €12,000, up from the previous €5,000. However, Rural Independent TD Matty McGrath, as he described, said the rollout of the grants were ridiculous. As he had said, many people are unable to avail due to geographical location. The Department of Housing did publish a map that shows which parts of the county are eligible for the grant. Those living in the green highlighted areas on the map are eligible to apply, and those living in the areas highlighted in red are not eligible. Now you can see from the map that the majority is highlighted in red. So Deputy McGrath did say the grants were a fanfare and more for PR. The Minister of State for Heritage, Malcolm Noonan, said that the department will be launching a new water action plan where it plans to expand significantly the number of areas for action and high status objective areas. He said the action plan would significantly ramp up the level of inspection actions. Deputy McGrath said he believes all householders want to keep their septic tanks right and do not want to pollute, but it's an onerous task for those living away from cities and towns.
And Louise, can you tell us a bit more about the grant itself in terms of who is normally eligible for it and when it's paid out?
Well, the grants are given on 3 different occasions. The National Inspection Grant is given to householders who failed the inspection plan and received an advisory notice. The Priority Area for Action Grant is available to a householder where the domestic water plant system is situated in a prioritised area for action. And then the High Status Objective Catchment Area Grant is available to householders where the domestic wastewater treatment system is situated in a High Status Objective Catchment Area.
It's just about time for us to wrap up today's podcast, but before we finish up, we at Agriland just want to express our deepest sympathies to the family and friends of the 2 students of Solution Agricultural College, Pallaskenry, who died in a road traffic accident this week.
Yeah, absolutely, Charles. A horrible story, an awful tragedy, another tragedy on our roads. I know that the college are offering support to students down there, and an awful sense of numbness and shock, which you can't even imagine, a desperate thing, and may they rest in peace.
Yeah, thanks very much, Aisling. That's it for this week. All the best and thank you.